I'm Arthur Reynolds, a 71-year-old retired architect from a quiet suburban spot in Ohio. My wife, Clara, left this world 5 years back, and since then, my daughter Melanie has been my main tie to family. I move a bit slower now, but my brain stays sharp, and my fingers still itch to draw blueprints. For years, I fixed problems in big buildings, but when Melanie shut me down as outdated, she didn't see the trouble brewing. It all kicked off on a sunny Sunday at Melanie's fresh house. She had her business buddies over, chatting up her real estate startup around the dinner table. I piped up with a tip on zoning rules, stuff I dealt with every day back in my job. She didn't even glance my way. Instead, she let out a laugh and said, "Dad, stay out of it. It's not for your generation." The whole room snickered, and a chill hit my chest like a winter draft. I sat there, fork in hand, feeling the sting spread. How could my own kid brush me off like that? I'd built her world, literally, with the house plans I sketched when she was small. But now, in her shiny new life, I was just an old relic. I nodded politely, but inside, a fire sparked. That laugh echoed in my ears all afternoon. As they kept talking deals and apps, I slipped out to the porch, staring at the yard. She thought she was on top, but I knew cracks form quiet at first. That night, alone in my bed, I made a quiet vow. I wouldn't forget those words. They'd come back to bite. Just before you continue to watch, Joe would like you to subscribe to this channel and like this video. It would encourage him to keep his streak of thrilling revenge stories for you to watch. Alright, back to the story. Back in my study that evening, I sank into my worn leather chair, surrounded by faded sketches of skyscrapers and homes I designed over the decades. Clara's photo sat on the bookshelf, her warm smile like a steady anchor in rough seas. She'd always said Melanie got my stubborn streak, but missed out on my cool patience. I picked up the frame and whispered, "She'll figure it out, Clara, one way or another." Her eyes seemed to nod back, urging me on. Setting it down, I reached for my old leather briefcase, dusty from years on the shelf. Inside, folders bulged with notes on land laws, tricky contracts, and lessons from flops I'd seen in my career. Melanie had no clue about this stash. She'd grown up thinking my work was just boring drawings. But these papers held real power, the kind that could build or break empires. As I flipped through, memories flooded. Late nights with Clara brewing coffee while I puzzled over blueprints. She'd tease me about being a fixer of dreams. Now, with Melanie's words still fresh, I saw clearly. This wasn't just hurt feelings, it was a chance to teach. I closed the case with a snap, a plan forming like lines on graph paper. And in that moment, I realized I was holding the blueprint to her downfall. It wouldn't be revenge, just reality catching up. Over the next week, I made a point to drop by Melanie's office unannounced. She was in the middle of a meeting, her voice booming about quick flips and high returns. When she spotted me, she waved me off like a pesky fly, saying she was too busy for chit-chat. I didn't push. Instead, I lingered in the waiting area, pretending to read a magazine. From there, I watched her team shuffle papers with tired eyes, dark circles like badges of exhaustion. Stacks of folders teetered on desks, messy and unlabeled, screaming chaos. I overheard her on a call, promising investors the moon, deadlines she couldn't meet, profits pulled from thin air. It took me back to my early days, spotting the same red flags in firms that crashed hard, like houses built on swamp without pilings. Melanie strutted around, chest puffed, thinking her youth made her bulletproof. But I saw the truth. Her whole setup was like a sandcastle at high tide, pretty but doomed. She had no idea how fragile it all was. And as I left quietly, slipping out the door, I also knew exactly where the sand would give way first, those shaky loans she hid behind smiles. One crisp morning, as I sipped coffee on my porch, a familiar car pulled up. It was Mr. Halpern, the local banker who'd handled my firm's accounts back in the day. He climbed out, hat in hand, looking serious. We shook hands, and he wasted no time. "Arthur, good to see you. Mind if we talk about Melanie?" He'd caught wind of her aggressive loan pushes, big sums for developments that sounded too ambitious. I kept my face straight as a ruler, nodding along. But inside, my thoughts spun like a blueprint unrolling. If the bank was sniffing around already, her foundation was cracking faster than I'd guessed. Halpern trusted my old judgment. He'd seen me steer clear of bad deals before. He asked if I thought she was over her head. I shrugged lightly, saying little, but his worried brow told me plenty. Nerves at the bank meant trouble brewing. As he drove off, I leaned back in my chair, piecing it together. Her empire wasn't as solid as she bragged. It was like a tower of cards in a breeze. I decided to play quiet, for now, letting the pieces fall on their own. But I'd be ready when they did. The family barbecue rolled around that weekend, smoke curling from the grill as I flipped burgers under the summer sun. Melanie showed up like a queen, parading her wins. Luxury condos sold out, fat checks from investors rolling in. Cousins slapped her back, neighbors raised their glasses, hanging on every word like she was spinning gold. I stayed by the fire, spatula in hand, letting the sizzle drown out her boasts. Then she turned to me with that smirk. Dad still swears by paper maps over GPS. Talk about stuck in the Stone Age. The crowd burst into laughs, eyes darting my way like I was the punchline. I forced a grin, but inside, my blood boiled hotter than the coals. How many times would she poke the bear? She thought she'd won the room, but all I saw was a balloon ready to pop. Her success felt like a house of cards in a stiff wind. As the party buzzed on, I poked the flames, sharpening my thoughts like a blade. She mistook my silence for surrender, but it was just the calm before I let her world tilt. One quiet evening, as I pushed my cart through the grocery aisles, I spotted Jason, one of Melanie's partners, near the frozen foods. His face was ghost white, hands shaky on a basket crammed with cheap dinners, like a man scraping by on fumes. We nodded hello, and he glanced around before leaning in. "Arthur, I haven't seen a paycheck in 2 months," he whispered, eyes darting like he feared spies. Melanie kept swearing the cash was incoming from some big deal, but he smelled lies now, his trust worn thin as old paper. He looked at me desperate, asking if I figured she'd pull through or if it was all smoke. I paused, weighing my words like bricks on a scale. Revenge wasn't my game, but truth had a way of bubbling up. I didn't answer straight. Instead, I asked for details, the missed payments, the dodgy deals, the whispers in the office. He spilled it all, words tumbling like dominoes. As we parted, his story sat heavy in my chest. Melanie's web was tangling her own feet, and now I had threads to pull. Back at my house, I dove into my old filing cabinets, pulling out stacks of papers like buried treasure from my architect days. Tax forms from past projects, dusty city zoning rules that hadn't changed much, and yellowed news clips on real estate flops that mirrored Melanie's shortcuts. I sifted through them methodically, my fingers remembering the feel of important docs. Piece by piece, a thick folder grew on my desk, evidence of how she bent rules on permits, skimped on inspections, and juggled numbers like a circus act. It wasn't for revenge, it was facts stacked neat as bricks. My years of organizing blueprints paid off, everything slotted in perfect. I tucked it away in my safe, not planning to show a soul yet. It felt like insurance against a rainy day, the kind where roofs cave in. Melanie thought she'd boxed me out, but this was my quiet ace. As I snapped the folder shut, a grim satisfaction settled in. I only needed to wait for the right collapse, when her shaky tower would wobble and call for a steady hand. Melanie called me up, her voice dripping reluctance, inviting me to her big investor pitch at a fancy downtown hotel. "Come see what real business looks like in this generation, Dad," she said, like it was a favor. I showed up in my best suit, slipping into the back row as the room buzzed with sharp-dressed folks, flashing cameras, and fake grins wide as billboards. She took the stage like a star, slides glowing with charts of sky-high profits and quick turnarounds she couldn't back up. Her words flowed smooth, painting dreams of luxury builds and fat returns, but I saw the holes, like promising a skyscraper on quicksand. I sat silent, arms crossed, watching her weave her spell over the crowd. They nodded, whispered approvals, hooked on her energy. But one sharp-eyed investor in the front, an older guy with a notepad, frowned through it all, jotting notes like he smelled smoke. His doubt hung in the air, a tiny crack in her perfect show. As applause erupted, I leaned back, knowing that one skeptic could unravel the whole yarn. As the applause faded and folks mingled with drinks in hand, an older investor, Mrs. Blake, caught my sleeve and pulled me into a quiet corner. Her sharp eyes, framed by silver hair, locked onto mine. She'd known me from my prime architect days, back when I sealed deals with handshakes that stuck. "Arthur," she said low and direct, Tell me straight. Does Melanie have the legs for this venture? Or is it all hot air? My gut twisted, fatherly love clashing with the pro in me who'd spotted 1,000 shaky builds. I couldn't outright spill her secrets, but I leaned in and murmured, "Watch the numbers closely. They tell the real story." She nodded slow, her brow furrowing like a blueprint with errors marked in red. That was it. No more words needed. I stepped back into the crowd, feeling the weight of what I'd sown. Loyalty kept me from shouting warnings, but integrity wouldn't let me lie. As Mrs. Blake wandered off, phone in hand, I knew that one whisper was enough to plant doubt, like a seed in fertile soil, ready to sprout cracks in Melanie's grand facade. That same night, Melanie hosted a bash at her office to toast the new commitments she claimed to have locked down. Champagne popped like fireworks, glasses clinked under string lights, and laughter bounced off the walls like echoes in an empty hall. I hung back near the snacks, watching her staff trade uneasy looks, eyes darting when they thought no one noticed. A young assistant, barely out of college, leaned close to another and hissed about unpaid office rent stacking up like forgotten bills. Melanie, meanwhile, towered in the center, chin high, toasting to her untouchable rise, as if the fizz could drown out the doubts. To the outsiders sipping bubbly, it screamed triumph, a peak of her bold era. But to me, it felt like the final burst of a dying star, bright, desperate, and doomed to fade into black. As the party hummed on, I slipped toward the door, but paused when I caught a snatch of talk from two partners in the corner. Their voices dropped low, faces grim. And then I overheard something chilling. Foreclosure whispers on her flagship property, the bank's hammer poised to fall. 2 days after that hollow celebration, as I sorted through my morning mail on the kitchen table, a stiff envelope stood out. It was addressed to Melanie, but delivered to me. Our shared last name must have confused the mailman. I hesitated, then opened it, my old eyes scanning the bold print. It was a default notice from the bank, cold and final, listing loans in the millions, payments missed like skipped heartbeats. Her empire teetered on the edge, interest accruing like weeds in an untended yard. I sat back, the paper trembling slightly in my grip. She'd overextended on flashy projects, assuming sales would flood in like rain after drought. But the numbers didn't lie. They screamed collapse. I refolded it carefully, slipping it into my drawer. She didn't know I had seen the truth, the bare bones of her crumbling structure. Fatherly instinct tugged at me to warn her, but her sharp words held me silent. Let the storm build. I'd seen enough falls to know when to step aside. For now, this was my hidden card, waiting in the deck. Later that week, I cornered her gently during a quick visit, probing about her finances with soft questions, like testing a beam for weakness. Melanie's eyes flashed fire. "I told you, Dad, you wouldn't understand. This is how business works now. Bold moves, not your slow plods." She accused me of undermining her, her voice rising like a faulty alarm. The cut went deeper than before, her disdain like acid on old wounds. I kept my cool, excusing myself without argument, but inside, my patience snapped like brittle wood. If she wouldn't heed wisdom, she'd taste the fallout, bitter as overbrewed coffee. She saw my exit as defeat, but it was strategy, a retreat to higher ground. Driving home, I replayed her denial, each word fueling my resolve. Arrogance was her architect now, drafting her own doom. Consequences loomed, inevitable as gravity on a leaning tower. She'd built high, but without solid footings, the drop would be swift and hard. Word count, 183. I started slipping into quiet meetings, reaching out to folks Melanie owed money to. Contractors with half-finished jobs, lawyers chasing signatures, even her own staff sneaking coffee breaks to vent. I never trashed her name. I just nodded and listened, like an old wall soaking up echoes. Their tales stacked up fast, wages skipped for months, checks bouncing like bad balls, projects greenlit without city nods. I scribbled it all in notebooks, pages filling like a dam about to burst. One contractor showed me invoices yellowing with age, his voice cracking as he admitted dipping into savings. A lawyer whispered about shady permits that could crumble under scrutiny. Melanie figured she'd shut me down with her snubs, but here I was, collecting the ripples of her mess. It was like piecing a puzzle from scattered bits, each story fitting snug to show the big picture. She thought silence meant I'd backed off, but it was me building a case without a word. Soon, her empire's cracks would be impossible to hide, wide as canyons in the sun. One bright morning, as I buttered toast in my kitchen, the phone jangled. It was a young journalist from the local paper, voice eager like a pup on a scent. He'd caught wind of Melanie's shaky empire from tipsters and wanted my take, knowing my architect past could spotlight her builds. "Any insights, Mr. Reynolds?" he pressed. I kept it neutral, no direct digs, just steered him to public records at City Hall, the kind open to anyone with eyes. Those files held gems, zoning slips, unpaid liens, developments teetering on legal edges. He thanked me profusely, scribbling notes I could almost hear. I hung up, sipping coffee, feeling the shift like a foundation settling. Melanie had no clue this call had happened, her secrets now in a reporter's hands. Within a week, headlines started brewing, whispers turning to print that would splash across breakfast tables. It wasn't my hand pulling the trigger. Facts were doing the work, sharp as nails in soft wood. With Melanie's stack of papers spread before me like a chaotic blueprint, I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. My old drafting table, dusty from disuse, transformed into a war room. Pencils scratching, calculators humming as I charted her debts like fault lines on a map. Properties listed in columns, options weighed like structural beams. She perched on a stool nearby, silent for once, her eyes following my every mark. No more snide remarks. Her gaze held a mix of defeat and wonder, like watching a magician pull order from a hat. I cross-referenced contracts, spotting loopholes she'd missed, renegotiating terms in my head. Hours blurred into days, coffee mugs piling up. Her mess was a tangled knot, but my steady hands unraveled it thread by thread. She fetched files when I asked, no arguments, her former fire banked low. As the picture cleared, a salvageable core amid the wreckage, she leaned back, exhaling slow. In that quiet, she realized the old man still had it, sharp as ever, building from ruins where she saw only dust. I didn't play savior for the whole empire. Some pieces had to fall, and I let them deliberate as a surgeon's cut. Her flashiest properties, over-leveraged dreams, I steered straight into the auction block. No bailouts, no miracles. I wanted the burn to linger, a reminder that humility outlasts hype. When the hammer dropped on her biggest project, that half-built condo beast, she crumpled in my study, tears streaming like rain on a leaky roof. "How could you?" she sobbed, but I stayed firm, arms crossed. No hugs, no soft words. Comfort would dull the edge. Failure's the best teacher, I'd learned long ago, like a house fire showing where the wiring failed. She needed to feel the heat to rebuild smarter. But I salvaged the bones, a few solid assets, debts restructured tight as a drum. Investors peeked back, tempted by stability over sparkle. It was rebirth, but on my terms, lean, honest, no room for ego's rot. She wiped her eyes, nodding through the ache, the lesson sinking deep. One cool evening, Melanie showed up at my door unannounced, her eyes puffy and red like she'd wrestled a storm. She stepped inside, voice soft as a whisper. "I'm sorry, Dad. I thought I was smarter than you, better, even. But I wasn't. I messed it all up." The words hung heavy. Her shoulders slumped under the weight of regret. For the first time in years, I pulled her into a hug. No bitterness left in my bones, just the warmth of a father who'd waited for this. She clung tight, like a kid again, and I felt the rift mend a bit. But I didn't go easy. Pulling back, I looked her square. "Arrogance is the quickest way to lose everything, Melanie. It blinds you faster than fog on a windshield." She didn't argue, didn't roll her eyes. Instead, she wiped her cheeks and met my gaze, the lessons sinking in like roots in good soil. We sat by the fire after, talking quiet about Clara, about old times. No more walls between us. And she nodded, truly listening this time. Her pride finally cracked open to let wisdom seep through. Together, we rolled up our sleeves and rebuilt her business from the ground up, smaller scale, lean as a wolf in winter, built on honest deals instead of smoke and mirrors. No more wild promises or chasing ghosts. Every step checked twice, like measuring beams before the pour. I guided her through renegotiations, trimming fat from contracts, settling debts with steady payments. Investors started peeking back, not hooked by flashy pitches but drawn to the solid ground we laid, reassured by numbers that added up, not dreams that floated away. Melanie threw herself in, learning my old tricks, paper trails, face-to-face handshakes, patience over push. Her reputation rose slow from the ashes, like a phoenix shaking off soot, whispers turning from mockery to nods of respect. She handled calls with humility now, crediting the old ways that saved her. No more jabs at my generation. Instead, she quoted my sayings in meetings, a quiet tribute. The office buzzed again, but grounded this time. As months passed, watching her thrive, I saw the shift clear. She finally understood where real wisdom lived, not in apps or hype, but in the tested bones of experience. Months later, the family barbecue came around again, smoke wafting lazy from the grill as I flipped burgers just like old times. Laughter filled the yard, plates clattering, kids chasing fireflies in the dusk. Someone, a cousin, I think, leaned toward Melanie, curiosity piqued. "How'd you pull through that whole mess, Mel? Your business was toast." She paused mid-bite, her eyes flicking to me across the picnic table. A soft smile tugged her lips, no trace of the old edge. "I didn't survive it," she said clear and steady. "He did." The words dropped like stones in a pond, rippling silence through the crowd. The same folks who'd chuckled at my outdated ways now shifted awkward, forks hovering. No more snickers, just quiet respect hanging thick as the grill smoke. I didn't gloat or puff up, that wasn't the point. I just kept turning the patties, the sizzle my only reply. Funny, isn't it? How everything collapsed when I stayed out of it, and how it rebuilt only when I stepped back in. Melanie squeezed my hand later, a quiet thanks. We'd come full circle, stronger for the fall. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video, comment, and smash the subscribe button. Also check out other videos on the channel. Joe's got more interesting stories for you.